Today we're taking a look at what came in Judges Guild Installment P from December of 1977. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Today's video continues our look at the products of Judges Guild with their bi-monthly installment that contains the very first Dungeons & Dragons full-size adventure module put out by Judges Guild. It's called the Thieves of Fortress Badabaskor, or at least that's how I say it, as well as their Judges Guild journal. Hope you enjoyed today's video. We're continuing our look at the products of Judges Guild. We got something really cool for you today. This is Judges Guild's very first sort of full-sized adventure module, the Thieves of Fortress Badabaskor. It is 32 pages. It's, every bit as big and detailed as the modules that were put out by TSR in the years that come shortly thereafter. We get the journal, which is their newspaper. This is kind of it's a lot like a fanzine, really, in terms of the kind of articles that it has, but it gives them industry news, letters column, ideas for dungeon masters, etc. If you've seen other videos, you know Judges Guild had this idea for a subscription service. They put out a bi-monthly packet, whatever they came up with, but generally designed for judges, referees, dungeon masters, to give them something to start from or work with. And one of the things early on, they created some dungeons and shared those. They did have a lot of information. They thought judges, referees would want that, and then they would go in and individualize it, right? But what they found in terms of feedback was, no, referees would really prefer if you gave me a full-blown, detailed product. And this is the first response to that. It is completely filled out like you would expect any module to be. This Dungeons & Dragons adventure is the idea of Mark Summerlot with input from other folks. We'll talk about that more here in a little bit. Really interesting stuff, and it's a really cool adventure even to use for today. So with installment P, it was the December of 77, January 78 delivery. Bob Bledsoe, primarily responsible for the products. At this point, remember, Bill Owen's no longer a partner in Judges Guild. If you bought this outside of the subscription, it was $3.50. You would get the journal and you would get the adventure module. That was it. As I've mentioned before, the Judges Guild journal at this point is basically a newspaper. It is literally printed on newspaper print. You can sit there, drink your morning coffee, read your newspaper about all things Judges Guild, right? It was very cheap to produce. I think they charged 80 cents for this if you bought it separately. The challenge with this is, well, these are pretty readily available. As you might imagine, with a newspaper that's closing in on 50 years old, the quality in terms of holding up over time, not great. They rip really easily. Even just trying to open up and look at them to make this video, I had a little tiny tear on one of my pages. Things are getting better at Judges Guild, I think. This artwork here on the first page is very high quality. And then they've got a nice headline here, Fantasy Role-Playing Gaming Explained. Who wouldn't want to pick that up and read it, right? So the first thing we'll do is just take a look at the Judges Guild Journal. You notice at the top, dedicated to swords and sorcery fantasy gaming, published by the creators of fantasy game aids for Dungeons & Dragons. They say circulation 2,200, and this is issue 7, also known as issue P, and it's item number 53. And I've mentioned before, I think, that the initial mailing was I for initial, and then they just started using those letters, so J, K, L, M, N, and we're all the way up to P at this point. Inside the issue, the Inn of the Sunken Bridge, which is a ready-made inn that you could drop into your home campaign. Lycanthropy by Lynn Kafka. The Broken Lance, Heraldry in Dungeons & Dragons, and an article on constructing villages. Oh, and here's our credits. So the credits, you see all these different people here who are involved. And this time they say illustrations both by Bob Bledsoe Jr., Pixie Bledsoe, and the Sorcerers Guild, Brian Hennon. Okay. The first thing we're going to do is talk about this article on fantasy role-playing gaming explained, and this is by Bob Bledsoe. The first thing he answers here is, what is a fantasy campaign? I'll read a little bit of it, and then we'll summarize. A fantasy campaign is a unique game concept which permits a group of players to experience the thrills of, and he mentions all these things: Star Wars, Star Trek, Flash Gordon, John Carter, Mars, Tolkien, Conan, Lone Ranger, Superman, on and on and on. And he basically says the judge will select what mythos, which type of game are you going to play, right? Is it Wild West? Is it fantasy? Is it sci-fi, etc.? You get a set of rules, so you know what, everybody sort of knows what the standard framework is. The players begin play by selecting the type of creature they wish to assume as a role in the game session to follow. The type of game that you've picked obviously determines the type of creatures you can be. For example, elves and dwarves, common in fantasy, not so much in the Wild West in sci-fi, right? You'll have some standard characteristics: strength, intelligence, dexterity, among others. You will roll some dice to determine what your starting scores are. That also will tell you what type of characteristic or another game sort of skill set you would focus on with your characters. For example, fighters want to be strong, wizards, I want to have a high intelligence, and so on. He says, but don't worry about, if you have a bad score to start with, because one of the common components in this game is as time goes on, you have the opportunity to overcome, sort of any shortcomings. And that's a component, right? A very common, not always, but very common component of role-playing games, early on at least, is that there's this step-up system of improvement, right? Where, like in the D&D context, you gain experience and you gain levels, right? And that's one of the most important. And one of the other things that's really important, of course, is, as he calls it, hits to kill, or how much damage your character can sustain before he or she dies. It's interesting they call them hit to kill. They haven't really, hit points has not really become the common phrase yet with Judges Guild. He also mentions there's often different dice that you need to do, and these polyhedral dice are used for different things in the game. He mentions 4, 8, 12, and 20, I think, in addition to six-sided die. He says, now that we know what we're going to play and you have your characters ready, the judge has to carry out his or her important function, which is creating the situations in which the players will have the opportunity to meet and defeat, usually, the enemy, perform heroic deeds, quests, grow in strength and wealth, and accomplish the impossible. The enemy, often some type of an evil creature, and you set off to find the creature and defeat it, right? And again, he says it's really important that the judge have a background in whatever it is, so fantasy literature, fantasy campaigns, or sci-fi, whatever it is, so that that person, your judge, is going to be able to react to all the random things that happen, random decisions your characters make, and come up with things that sort of feel right for that genre. He mentions characters can encounter wandering monsters in the dungeons, which is, of course, a common thing in D&D. Roll for surprise. He talks about rolling to hit, how you roll in this matrix with a D20 to see whether or not you are successful. And then goes on to say, as your campaign progresses, your player character accumulates wealth and experience. At some point, builds a stronghold, a castle, a wizard's tower, begins to trade, begins to have followers, begins to have even maybe a town that rises up around him. Wizards, of course, research magical items and spells, and they have like a whole new dimension of things to do besides just go down into the dungeon. He also mentions here one other thing, which is, so how do you get started with your campaign? Of course, he says first you got to pick what you want to play, and it should be something that'll be interesting not just once but over a period of time. That was another key component, right, of role-playing, was you came back to the table with the same character, if the character survived, session after session, week after week. He also says judges should not overlook the importance of town and a setting with NPCs, and give them, as he says, give them names and backgrounds, levels of experience, and their own sort of unique motivations. The more you make your home base town interesting, then the more realistic and vibrant your world's going to be for your players. Okay, what games are available? No surprise, he mentions D&D, Empire of the Petal Throne, Chivalry and Sorcery, Emerald Tablet for miniature battles. No mention of Tunnels and Trolls, incidentally. Switching to science fiction, Flash Gordon, Metamorphosis Alpha, Traveler, Space Patrol, Boot Hill for the Wild West, Superhero 2044 for those who want heroic games. And then finally he says, what other aids are available? Nice opportunity here for him to plug himself. And so he says, just like Dungeons & Dragons, Judges Guild offers a wide range of aids for you. The City-State of the Invincible Overlord, Teagle Manor, Wilderlands of High Fantasy, which we covered in recent videos. You can also get our Judges Shield to help make your gameplay easier. Our campaign hex system, so like the blank maps to draw your own maps on. And D&D also has the Dungeon Geomorphs and Monster and Treasure assortment. So really good introduction. It's really interesting. I've been reading this book by John Peterson. He's very interested in understanding how people thought and talked about what made this game unique at the time and how people explained this game to someone who never played before. So I thought that was a pretty interesting article that sort of dovetailed into that pretty nicely. Our next article is Jocular Judgments, and it's basically an announcement about the monster manual that TSR has produced. Incredibly to me, he has typed out the name of every single monster that is in the book. And then he goes on to tell you what kind of the stat block. He goes like row by row, what's in the stat block, frequency, treasure type, attacks, damage, and just tells you every single thing that's going to be there for each of these monsters, as well as some of the common things like magic resistance and how that works. And bottom line, he says, needless to say, a work of this magnitude requires a great deal of time to digest and playtest to do a complete and fair review, but we feel confident the vast majority of gamers and players alike will enhance the field of fantasy role-playing games. The Monster Manual is a valuable tool to enhance the field of fantasy role-playing games. And gives big congratulations, job well done to E. Gary Gygax for putting that together. I'm kind of surprised he doesn't mention how awesome the art is, because that was the other part for me that I thought was really impressive with the Monster Manual. Swords and Sorcery, Sagas of the Sacred Genre. Bob, a big fan of alliteration, announces that Flashing Swords number 4, Barbarians and Black Magicians, has been published by Dell, and it's in a sword and sorcery anthology. Swords Against the Marlock by Catherine Curdy, The Bagful of Dreams by Jack Vance, Storm in a Bottle by John Jakes, The Tupilok by Paul Anderson, Lands Beyond the World by Michael Moorcock. I think that's it. Tips from the Tower is usually information for suggestions for judges. Here he's talking about his home campaign, and he says people have had questions about the maps, and so he just gives you the big map of their campaign world and shows you where maps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are located. Remember, map 1 is the area around the city-state of the Invincible Overlord. 2 and 3 are in the first part of Wilderlands of High Fantasy, and 4 and 5 come with the second part of Wilderlands of High Fantasy, and obviously there's going to be more stuff filled in around it over time. Interestingly of note also, up in the top right corner of this map, it says Blackmore area. And he says that's where they've decided to put the Blackmore information from Dave Arneson. Remember, the first fantasy campaign was a standalone product that did not come in a subscription that they had just recently put out. And they've decided to place that in their campaign world as well. A couple other announcements. They're going to release a reformatted City-State of the Invincible Overlord playing aid and a new Ready Reference Sheet package. Both of these things are incorporating stuff that was in some of their earlier subscription booklets. Now we have a couple of articles by Lynn Lakofka, super famous part of the early history of Dungeons & Dragons. He's got one on critical hits and one on lycanthropy. So the first one here, which is a hit location table, which they say it's projected to be used in advanced D&D, according to Gary, who's collaborated with Lynn on this development. So talk about training, and obviously you have training if you're going to fire a missile accurately, and then you make this roll to hit, and if you hit, then based on your level, you'll roll D100 to see where you strike. Face, head, neck, chest, abdomen, leg, genitals, arm, weapon arm, or shield arm. Okay, and so once you find out which part of the body you hit, then you come down to the chance of special damage, which is going to be in that same body. So let's say you hit somebody in the chest, you'd come down to the second chart in the column for the chest, which is the fourth one over. You would again roll D100 to see based on your level whether you cause what they're calling special damage. If you don't, you just get your regular damage roll for your attack, probably a d6 for an arrow, right? And then if you do get special damage, now he says later on, and gives an example, you roll a d10. I'm assuming the d10 is your bonus damage, so you get a d10 plus your normal die for damage, and then you have special damage, special type of damage. It can be like in the chest, it could be you hit the lungs, you instant kill, you hit their spine, you stunned them, you've caused some type of bleeding, like internal bleeding, which is going to get an extra roll of damage. And for a number, the internal bleeding will give for a number of rounds of extra bleeding as well. So that's his concept. Did not make the final rules, and in fact, this whole issue of critical hit tables and so forth is something that people were talking about for quite a while. I do believe in the Blackmore Compendium, there are some critical hit tables that are alternate rules, but they never make it into advanced D&D. And then there's this article on lycanthropy, and it's just a really detailed, thoughtful article on how lycanthropy works. He obviously talks about the different types of lycanthropy that you can be affected with, how it happens, like the transformation, the fact that you can sort of use some weapons, and particularly I think he says werewolves and were-rats. Other were-creatures probably not much more than maybe a club or an axe. Probably prefer their natural attacks. You got to take your armor off, right, because you're going to change size. In his world, it takes 1 to 6 minutes for the transformation to occur, so you sort of have time to do something like that. But you also have to be protected because you could be attacked while you're going through the transformation, I suppose. And he says you're not animalistic. You retain some of your intelligence, but not the same. You can't communicate. You can't talk like you would have before. You can't, draw letters with your paws or hands in the dirt. And so that's supposed to be a handicap with other players in the party. If you're obviously if your player character has lycanthropy, you got to come back and get your stuff when you change back. Because you set your equipment aside. You don't just discard it blindly, but you don't carry it with you anymore, right? He allows you to gain experience points, both in your normal form and lycanthropy form. In the lycanthropy form, you only get to keep half those experience points. You obviously get to keep all the experience that comes from gold or magic items that you recover. And then he puts a level limit on when your lycanthropy had the disease. It affects how high a level you can go to, which is the hit dice of the creature in the monster manual. Sets your cap, and you can go up to 3 levels over that if your prime requisite is over 12. You have a 10% chance for every point over 12 to keep moving up, maximum of 3. If you're already higher, you get to make that roll to stay there, and if not, you drop down a level, roll again, drop down a level until you get down to the hit dice of your lycanthropy. So as he says, this is not supposed to be, it can be of some benefit, especially for lower level characters, but ultimately it's a disease, and it should be seen as an impediment that you're going to want to get rid of at some point. And so he has some negative things, to go in there with it. He also talks about alignment, the type of alignment your character is compared to the type of alignment of this lycanthropy. You tend towards your alignment, but there's still a chance that you, even if you're good, say you're good aligned, if this creature is chaotic, you may still end up sort of, like he says, a Jekyll and Hyde situation when you change. He also talks about the fact that the animal part of your brain will enjoy the lycanthropy, and you'll have a tendency not to want to change back. And so he's got some charts in there for you to roll when you go to change back to see whether you basically, the lycanthropy part of you decides, I don't want to change back. And then you have to wait a few hours and try again. And he ends that up by saying the different ways you can get that, obviously by being bitten by a were creature, but also there could be potions created by wizards or alchemists from the saliva of a live were creature. You could use that as well. So it's pretty good article, very thoughtful, and it's an interesting part. I played in a Holmes basic campaign a couple of years ago, and the very first adventure, I think the very first encounter, my fighter got bitten by a were boar, and so that was kind of a neat thing for the rest of the campaign I played in, I had to always we had to make a roll when I was under a stressful situation to see if I would transform, which obviously happened a few times. Okay, Phil Bentz, witchcraft in D&D. Lots of different people have written articles about this, and he says, I sort of hesitate to do it, but I think we should have witches in addition to magic users, and because they should be a little bit different. His thought is to make them basically, he calls them psionic women, and use the sonic powers from Eldritch Wizardry and give them some base and superior abilities. He has a chart there as they go up. So basically, gives them sonics and a few additional things. 4 hit dice like magic users. First level, they can prepare drugs like an alchemist. 3rd level, love potions. 5th level, cursed talisman. 7th level, talisman of death. 8th level, potions. 9th level, animate a broom once a month. And 13th level, prepare magic items just like a wizard. So it's okay. This is just an advertisement, but I thought it was kind of interesting. This is from Luzoki, Game Science, and he's just got some different things for sale here. Then we have this article called the Broken Lance. It's by Brian Hennon, but it's sort of a guy standing on a street corner giving you rumors about things that have happened in the city-state of the Invincible Overlord. I really like this article, especially if this would be something that they would do every month. They would just give you some new rumors of, completely separate from any player characters, interesting characters who'd come through town, rumors about things that have happened in different places around in their campaign world. This guy's sort of just like, says in the narrative here, he's been given a little silver and he starts telling stories about different things that have happened recently. I thought it was a pretty clever way of adding new rumors to keep the city-state sort of alive. Heraldry by Alan Dowd, and it's just a little bit of background and some charts for coats of arms. Then a couple little extra things here. We've got this DM listing, which a lot of fanzines did as well, where you could send in and say, hey, people contact me if they're interested in the game, if they're in my area. I thought the groups were interesting. You had the University of Lowell Tactical Society in Lowell, Massachusetts, Illinois Valley Fantasy Wargame Club in Streator, Illinois, and the Red Dragon Fantasy and Wargame in Allentown, PA, and then some individual people. They also had a list of coming conventions. Emperor's Birthday Convention in Elkhart, Indiana, TexCon in Austin, Can Games in Ontario, Canada, Origins 78 up in Detroit, Michigan, Gen Con 11 in Lake Geneva, and PinCon 78 at Widener College in King of Prussia, PA. We have a short article here on constructing villages. I mean, one of the things you get plenty of it here, right, are charts for sort of everything. And so Richard Mueller's thing is you roll D20 to see the population. Starts from 10 to 100 all the way up to over 1,000. Based on that, you have a different number of commercial buildings you would have. And then he's got a chart here for the commercial buildings. On the right-hand side, he's got, for example, a farrier. If you have 200 people, you automatically get a farrier. You get one farrier for every 200 people. An armorer for every 300 people. So if your village is that big, then you're guaranteed to have at least one of these. And there's a number of things like that. Barracks, magic shops, amazingly. You have 300 people, you have a magic shop. So this guy's campaign clearly has a lot of magic. Temple, jeweler, moneylender, slave bazaar. Those all come with 300 people. With 500, you get a cemetery. Seems like you need that a little sooner. A guaranteed cartographer, tax house, guild hall, college and library, and a brothel. And if you have 1,000 people, you get an inn, which again, to me, seems a little excessive. It seemed like you'd have one before you got to 1,000 people. But anyway, and then there's some random stuff like a butcher. Seems like every town would need some source of that, right? Leather worker, smith, mill. If you have agriculture, you're going to need a mill. Anyway, good idea. Not sure the charts are realistic, but good idea of the different types of buildings or commercial buildings, right, to put into your towns. And that's always, I think, really helpful. Then we have this monster by Pixie Bledsaw called the Squashian. Armor class 9, hit dice 1 -1. The Squashians are a totally weaponless society located in marshy regions near Phantasmaguire. I don't know, something like that. Their only defense is they hurl themselves on top of an enemy and try to subdue him. They're usually used as a scout because they have multiple eyes and they're really good at keeping you from getting surprised and maybe seeing things before they see you. You can eat pieces of them, which will grow back. If you're in a bad, they don't taste good, but at least it's something you can eat because I guess they're semi-vegetable-like. And you can see their feet have these little like roots. They can stick their feet down in the earth and just absorb their nutrition from water and from the soil, so they don't actually have to eat as part of your part of the campaign. So anyway, malevolent monsters. That's the only one this time around. We have prodigious plate mail, which is their letter column from their readers. So this is just one huge letter by this guy named Stephen Huff, and most of his letter is him just telling them about his home campaign. He says he sent in his name to be one of the DMs listed, and he's always looking for players. Used to have several judges or DMs in his area, but he's the only one left now, and so he's hoping to increase the number of people that want to play in his campaign. His campaign is set in a world that was created by these really high, powerful wizards and ancient dragons, and he gives through all the details about the surface world, and then he has a hollow world inside different kingdoms and sort of background and how it all works, as well as some of the things that he's done that are different from the regular rules, like making up a lot of his own monsters. And at the very, very end, he says, I have questions. Can you tell me what's going on with the D&D new rules? That's be the AD&D. And he asks for some advice about miniatures. And they basically tell him, the Holmes Basic has come out, but AD&D has not just yet. But we think the Monster Manual will be out soon, and other books to follow. And then he tells him about his preference for Heritage, Grenadier, and the Fantastique sets that are all pretty good. So his personal preferences for, this is Bill Owen, Garrisons miniatures for wizards, and Grenadiers for dwarves, and elves, Heritages for the superheroes. So here's something you can drop in your home campaign. It's from Fred Moy, Inn of the Sunken Bridge. And it's just, he's got it in the campaign north of the city-state of the Invincible Overlord. Basically, there's a road, there's a river, and the reason this guy's got his inn here is because he owns the ferry that crosses right there, and it's really the only spot for miles and miles, and so he gets all that traffic. Gives you all the details of the people. Here's the drawing using the Judges Guild hex sheets, and you can see the river is running sort of southeast or southwest to northeast, and then his stuff is here on the eastern side of the river. And there's some detailed drawing here for, it's a fortified inn, so he's got these walls, so he has little guards that can keep an eye against raids from, say, goblins or bandits or something like that. And it's just got it all detailed out, and like I said, it probably has about 10-15 NPCs that are there all the time. This guy has his extended family and people in his employ, who like the cook and the farrier and so forth, who are there. Gives details about what they have and the prices and that kind of thing. So, and as he says, you could drop that in really anybody's campaign if you wanted to. Let me get into some of the standard stuff. Several of these pages are very similar. This one's updated. This is the booty list. So here you see we're up to 54 now, which is the stuff from this month's subscription service. The stop press is actually not anything new. He lists the prices, reminding people they're selling the stuff they mentioned last time, like the Monster Manual for AD&D, SPI's Middle-earth, War of the Ring, and some other games. These are just the same advertisements. We got the Dungeons & Dragons products, the Garrison miniatures, Grenadier miniatures, the Der Krieger spells, Fantastiques, and Heritage models here. Same stuff at the top, advertising Spies game and Chaosium's game, same as last time. And the same back cover advertisement, which includes Fantasy Games Unlimited and these Frazetta posters in the middle and some other stuff, dice and sci-fi stuff as well. A couple other interesting things inside this Judges Guild journal. We have pictures here from their Christmas party, and a bunch of people that are in there: Scott Rowan, Craig Fogel, Mike Petrowski, attempting to start a Kingmaker game, so that only lasted one turn. Bill Davis, Mark Homer, Doug Hazelrig, Scott Rowan, TJ Cotter. In the third row, Debbie Bledsoe, Mark Summerlot, Mark Homer, and Craig Foyle. If you don't think the pictures are very clear, they're not, and they can't see them very well in the original either. And then we have this art, which is fantastic. These are from the Sorcerers Guild, and it's this person, this like Guild Dia. It's the same one we've seen in the last couple of things. We've got this, I think he's a giant here. He's on the first page of that. He's also on the back cover of the adventure module. And then there was an article on witches, and so here's a drawing of this lady who looks like she could be a witch that they've done as well. And then Robert Bledsoe Jr. has this drawing of a dragon. Looks like he's holding Mickey Mouse out over the cliff, and the mouse is saying, "Let me go or I'll crack you over the head." And obviously he lets him go. He's going to fall. All right, that's it for the first part where we talk about the Judges Guild journal, and now we're going to take a look at this adventure module. This is the first Judges Guild sort of full-sized adventure module for Dungeons and Dragons. So this is perhaps one of the first adventure modules that's published in a form that's sort of what we would expect today. Like I said, it's very much like what you would get from TSR when they start putting out their adventure modules here in the very near future. The Thieves of Fortress Badabaskor. Concept. Here we go. Mark Summerlot. Look at these different people who helped design it. There's like 6 different people. 5 people worked on the graphics, and Pixie did a little bit of art on the inside. Bob Bledsoe Jr. did the drawing on the outside. Here's our table of contents. We'll go through this stuff, a little bit of background, some information about a particular person who's important to the background story. The Judges Guild sort of hex map to show you where this is. And then we got some maps of the sort of village fortress that's outside, and then you go inside this, inside the mountain to go into the caves and down into the dungeons. So here's a really good bit of background here. I'm not really sure how your characters would know this, but it's there for, I think, the dungeon master to know in case it's helpful. And bottom line is that there was a fortress town that was built here once upon a time. It was overrun by these people that followed this human wizard turned sort of deity called Angal, and they were a very chaotic group, and they lived there for a really long time, became very powerful sect that controlled a lot of area. Eventually they were chaotic, they sort of frayed, lost their organization, lost their power, and they get taken over by some bandit group, which has now moved in and lives here in the fortress. And here's the guy, Angal of the Perpetual Void. You can see there, this is Bledsoe Jr.'s drawing. 4 arms, 2 swords, 2 like flails, and they've got a little bit of background, a background for this creature or person or whatever we want to call it. Basically, he was a powerful magic user, was interacting with all kinds of dark spirits, sort of ends up in this big conflict where he fights this thing called the All King of the Spirit Universe. Angal is successful in that battle, but permanently transformed. He loses his spellcasting ability, his sonic abilities, and now he's just he has the 4 arms, the dragon scale skin, bat wings. He does 1 to 20 points of damage with each of his swords, and 2d8 with each of his flails. He gets 4 attacks per round. He's not in the adventure, but he is the deity that these folks worshipped. They're actually gone at this point. Okay. All right. So here is the map of the hex, and you can see here the fortress Badabaskor is down here. There's a little road coming up, and then they're right there in that mountain. You can see that they a pretty well defended position. You can't see their area from a long way off, but if they get up on the top of their mountain, they can see far away in every direction. The first thing we have is the village, which is peopled with hundreds of soldiers. But here's the zoom in detail, and you can see, I think you can see on the map, you've got these buildings that are built up on a rise, and then they dug back into the mountain. So there's a fortified entrance into the caverns, or whatever you want to call it, back into the mountain that they have. And then they give you all the detail about all the NPCs that are here. Like I said, they mention hundreds of soldiers, foot soldiers and cavalry soldiers, etc., that these bandits have that live here, but you don't actually ever, it doesn't seem to me, encounter all that many people. It's not clear how the party's going to get in, if they're supposed to be sneaking past everybody, or if they use subterfuge and act like they're going to be part of the bandit world, and then they just try and sneak into the caverns. But in any event, that they give you this background for this area. They have an interesting system here. In the dungeon, they'll just say there's a trap, but they don't tell you what it is. And then you come to this chart based on the dungeon level. You roll D100 to see if it's a cage trap, deadfall, gas, snare with liquid, slide with a monster, missiles with spikes, or some type of special trap. And they have, charts, the condition, the size, the depth, whether there's illusions, disguise, bait, decoys, lures, coverings, trapdoors, cage traps, deadfall, snare, slides, missiles, special traps, liquid, gas pits, spike pits, or special pits. And everything you would roll again to see kind of what it is. And then the other thing that's interesting is this side view. You can see here the fortified town, or whatever it is, fortified area, opens you into the second level. You could actually, if you were a thief or something, and not get seen, you can actually scale up to the caves above to go into the first level if you wanted to do that, or you can go to the second level and come up that way. And so you have pretty typical 5-level dungeon. It's lots of good detail. You can see here compared to things earlier on, the way the descriptions are written out. There's a little bit of background on NPCs, description of the room, stats for the monsters, treasure, and a little bit extra background. So, not probably what you get in today's 2024 level of description, but compared to the day, this is a lot of description. And there's our map for this is level 1, which is up above. And then and some of it, like this level here, is pretty logical. It's all people that are supporting the bandit army, or whatever you want to call them. Then we get down here to level 2. Same stuff. A lot of people who were involved in sort of an extension of the city, but just back inside the mountain. Then we get down here to level 3. Things start to shift a little bit. Part of that lore was that there was an ancient red dragon in there, and when these folks tried to clear out the dungeon levels, they encountered this dragon, and so instead of trying to defeat it, they just sort of walled it off, so they couldn't go down to level 3. But now you can get down there again. And you have this huge cavern here at the front where their dragons are, and there's an entrance going south that actually comes out somewhere else, they don't say where, but has a separate exit into the surface world. But then if you're in the top part of that, probably avoiding the dragons, I would guess, there's some random, not random, there's some monsters there that you could end up fighting with. But it begins to be a little bit sort of random in my view of what these monsters are like. We get down here to level 4, and it continues to be a mix of some random creatures, but then a lot of this does all tie back together. This is the main sort of level where you get into the the big bad guy, right? Which is an evil priest down here. And here we can see the map, right? And he's got, as you might imagine, down there on the bottom left is sort of the big temple areas, the underground temple areas for these bad guys. And this is the ancient temple of Angal, the guy that we saw up above, the sort of deity that they worshipped. And there still is a bad evil priest down here for you to attempt to conquer. This stuff gets really tough. Let me see if I can find his 17th level. I mean, so this is a pretty pretty substantial difficulty. And up at the earlier levels, I mean, if it weren't for the fact that it was one sort of potential combat after another, I would say that second and third level characters are going to be okay with that, right? But down here, you're just going to get wiped out. And so there's not a lot of balance between level 1, where a low-level party probably is doing okay, although I'm surely not completely sure how you're getting past the entire multi-hundred soldier army. But once you got into the dungeon, it's not that hard, in terms of the monsters you would fight. But down here, like I said, there was dragons in levels 3. If you tried to fight them, got these high-level priests, and he's obviously not alone down here. And then finally we have level 5, which almost feels like it might have been a forgotten level. They don't really say anything about the passage between levels and whether any of these things are sealed off or anything like that. But again, down here you get into this ancient area that was carved out years and years ago. And this seems like it's even older than the stuff up on level 4. This seems to have a lot of the original people that built this are buried down here. And buried is code word for you're going to run into some undead monsters, I think. I think it's always a code word. Interesting thing in the back of this adventure is alternate descriptions. So they've got these random rooms that you can say, I like this better for one of these rooms. And you can you write in the number there and you substitute this for what was in the original draft. That's a really interesting concept I've never seen anywhere before, where they give you random, whatever that is, 6 or 7 per level that you could use in place of that. Have a very, very abbreviated booty list here in the back of some third-party products you could buy, as well as a couple of Judges Guild products you could buy. Then you have some cool art in here I just thought I'd share with you. I don't think there's a beholder in here, but I think Pixie just liked it and decided to draw one, so that's in here randomly. There we got some type of mummy coming out. I think it's a mummy. And this room, sort of an ancient temple-like room here. And then Pixie, really great art, I think, from her here. We've got this wizard. He's got his cauldron. He's casting stuff. He's summoning up some type of extraplanar demon or other creature. And then this is my favorite drawing of hers. I get myself out of the way in here. And it's called Encounter with a Black Pudding, right? And look at that thing just reaching up around this hapless dude and sucking him in. I love slimes and oozes and those kind of things, and a black pudding is one of the best, I think for sure. And then finally, the Sorcerer's Guild, this Guild Dia artist, has this, looks like a necromancer to me, right? Because of the skull and the tomb back behind. Really, really good art. So they get really good, a mixture of art. Some of that art was not great. Some of that art was amateurish, and some of it was quite good. The stuff from the Sorcerer's Guild is always really top notch. And again, same artist here on the back. I think this looks like a giant. Maybe it's just the perspective. Maybe this was drawn as if you were a halfling, but it looks like a giant to me. Maybe it's, I don't think it would be an ogre. It doesn't look like one to me. I think it would be a giant. But anyway, really, really good art. So those two things are what you got in Judges Guild Installment P. A lot of quality. You get a lot of really interesting articles every time in the Judges Guild Journal, and this is a really, really well done product. And as we'll see, they continue to put out products like this for several years to come, and this one really starts off at a high level. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I hope you're enjoying our series taking a look at Judges Guild. I hope you're subscribed, and I hope you have friends who are interested. You'll send them our way, and maybe they will be subscribers as well. Have a great rest of your day. Till next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.